Hi, my name is Travis Borbeau, and I'm the head of visual development at Mold3D. Today, we're going to be taking a look at cinematic lighting inside of the Slay project. If you have not already, you can download the project from the Epic Marketplace and follow along. We'll be covering the basics of environment lighting, starting from scratch with the lights turned off and rebuilding the lighting along the way, so that you're able to either follow along with the project to make tweaks to the lighting or possibly even have the confidence to build a lighting scenario of your own. With that said, I hope you enjoy the process, and let's get started. To get started, we're going to take a look at the environment level. When you open it up, you'll have several sub-levels loaded. So you can go ahead and click and remove any of the extra sub-levels that you don't see here. What we're concerned with is temple lighting, temple geo, and temple characters. For temple characters, you can go ahead and turn that eye off. And if you'd like, you can remove it because we're going to be dealing mostly with the architecture. Once you remove temple characters, we're left with temple geo and temple lighting. If I go into temple geo, you'll see that all the architecture disappears. By toggling the visibility back on, we can bring it back. When we look at the temple lighting is known as a lighting sublevel. Typically, we'd have an LSL underscore and whatever that scene name might be. For this project, since we only have the temple, we'll just be calling it temple lighting. If we toggle our visibility off, all of the lighting disappears. However, if you click around, you can notice that the geo is still there. If we go up here to our view modes in our main menu, you can go down to different view modes like lit, unlit, lighting only, and detailed lighting. We'll be going over all of these as we go through the project today, and a lot of our lighting will be done in lighting only. For right now, we want to go to unlit. Once you click on unlit, you can see all of your geos revealed. And now that it's revealed, let's go over making a new lighting sublevel so we can recreate the lighting from the environment from Slay. If you haven't created a level before, you simply right-click, go to level, and give it a name. I'm simply going to put light setup for now, and I'm going to drag this over to my levels panel. Once it's in the levels panel, we'll want to double click on it and select it. That way, when we go to our place actors and start adding our base lights, we're adding them into the correct level. Essentially, your lighting sublevel, if it's for the environment, should only have environment lights in it. That way, if someone else is to pick up your scene or jump in and start working on it, and they notice that it's packed with geo or there's other items like effects, they'll have a question of whether or not it should be there. After dragging your lighting level into your levels panel, double click it to make sure it's selected. We're going to go down to the place actors panel, select a lighting submenu inside, grab a few directional lights and drop them in. We're going to also grab a skylight, and then we'll select the visual effects menu. Once we got the visual effects menu, you'll want an exponential height fog, a volumetric cloud, and a sky atmosphere. Once we have our lights in the scene, we'll want to zero them out in your details panel and go to our world outliner and start to rename and keep them organized. So once you've dragged all your lights and everything is renamed and organized, we're ready for the next step. So on the next step, you'll want to add a post process. You'll go to that same place actors, type in post in your search, and just drop the post process volume into your scene. It doesn't really matter where you put it. Then select post process and go over to your details. Once we're in the details, you're going to want to go to the top search panel and type in post, or rather unbound. And once you have unbound, you can make sure that your box here that says infinite extent unbound is selected. The only thing this is going to do is make sure that that effect happens throughout your entire level. So we'll X out of that search details to get our menu back. Then we're going to go down into exposure. So we won't get too deep into color grading on this project, and we might touch on a few items on the post process, but for now, all you need to be concerned with is the exposure compensation. We're going to set that at 1.8. We're also going to go down to the min and the max and set those both to 0 because we don't want our scene exposing up and down. Pretty much at this point, that's all we'll discuss and go over with post process as we jump back into the rest of the lighting. So with the rest of the lighting, we're still in unlit mode, so we can go ahead and switch that over to lit. And we're going to turn on our first primary directional light. Whatever you name that light, go ahead and select your main directional light and toggle the visibility on. You're going to be presented with a default intensity, probably of 10. So I'm going to change mine to match that. And just kind of go through a few of the settings on the actual directional lights. Just like the rest of the lights in Unreal, most of the art directable lights you're going to be working with are going to be on the top. Most of your optimization or problem solving items will be down here below this line. Some items sometimes will have an arrow that you have to click to expand in case you get lost and you're looking for it and you're new to the engine. So I know that my intensity is going to be about 8, but we really won't get into adjusting many of these intensities till we have all of our lights blocked in. But as a quick review, you have a light color, which allows you to color your light. You have the source angle, which is going to affect the shadowing of the light. You have soft source angle as well. Temperature, which allows us to warm or cool off the color selection, or to set this to neutral white and just use temperature to create your color. Cast shadows, everything else is somewhat self-explanatory here. We'll be going over volumetric scattering at a later point in the project. And when we look down here, main things you'll be concerned with later on will be your specular scale. When we do character work, we'll oftentimes bring that specular down to 0.7 or 0.8 to soften that specular reflection on the skin and keep it from looking too shiny. If you end up in trouble or you're optimizing, you'll want to come down here to your cast shadows, whether that's turning off cast ray tracing to save optimization or to turn off cast static shadows. You'll have a lot of items that you may, when you get to that point of optimization, to be concerned with. At this time, we're not going to be paying too much attention to it as we're just kind of blocking in our main light. So next up, we want to be able to turn on our volumetric clouds. Volumetric clouds are going to act as somewhat of a bounce card within the environment. They're going to actually help kind of create a fill or a little bit of light that's in addition to your skylight. So with that, we'll turn on our skylight as well. And we're going to go over here and make sure that when we're turning on our skylight and as we're introducing new lights, we want to make sure that they're not defaulting to stationary and that we make them movable. As a warning indicator, you'll get those little preview icons I mentioned earlier. I'm going to go up to my sun. I'm going to make that movable as well. I'm also going to go to my sky atmosphere and enable my sky atmosphere. On the sky atmosphere, for the majority of projects and the majority of time, you're not really going to mess around too much with most of these settings. However, the one setting that we'll get into details a little bit later is this art direction tab. This art direction tab is going to allow us to do things like kind of tweak the color of the sky or add more roll of the color of the sky later. But we'll get into details of that when we approach it. For right now, just turn on the sky atmosphere and make sure that that's enabled and set to movable, and we'll be in a good shape. We're going to go back to our directional light. We're going to go to the top here, and we're going to type in Atmo, A-T-M-O. When we do that, you'll notice that this first selection, atmosphere sunlight, is unchecked. So it may, for some reason, be checked if you've done previous projects, but for the most part, it should default to being unchecked. When we do select it, we're going to turn the lights on. Basically, this is attaching our sky and our sunlight. So now as I move my directional light, not only in rotation, but if I move it, I'm getting color contribution. So if you're not noticing any color contribution when you move, then you're going to want to go over here and just double check and make sure your atmosphere is selected. We're going to go back to our skylight. We're going to also make sure that on our skylight, the cast ray tracing is enabled. So if you just type in cast, you'll get up here and you can go down to where it says cast ray tracing shadows. If I turn this off and on, you'll notice a huge contribution. So by default, this may be turned off. If your scene seems like it's shallow when it comes to the depth that shadows add, then go ahead and just make sure you select this box. So if you've made it through this far, then you're well on your way to setting up all of your own environments, and good job. So you may notice a sphere inside of the shot. So let's go ahead and pause here for a second, just do a quick warm up and kind of go over what we're doing with that. So you can just drop a sphere in from the Place Actors menu, And then we'll just throw a simple material on that, chrome material. You can go with a light chrome or dark chrome. Specifically, if you darken it down, you're going to be able to tell kind of what light sources and silhouettes are having the biggest impact. So feel free to play around with those numbers. And then the reason for putting the sphere in here is basically anytime you have a lot of architecture, you're in tight nooks and crannies, and you're in a position where you don't necessarily want to be moving around a character or moving around the scene a lot. It's nice just to kind of literally have this sphere in here to kind of globally give you a shot of where your light sources are coming from and what's being illuminated, or basically what's having the most dramatic impact in your lighting. So you can see here, we're just kind of cycling off and on the geo and looking at where the sun position is. If you had an HDRI in here, this is a great trick for basically lining up your directional light to the sun position in the HDRI. It's also a useful tool when you're doing character lighting and you might be zoomed in close on a character where you don't necessarily want to be moving that camera in and out too much. So what we could do here is a nice trick of placing an empty actor as a pivot point and then parenting a sphere to that empty actor so that we can just rotate around that head or rotate around the body to get an idea of what elements in the environment are really reflecting on him, what colors is the light going to be picking up and bouncing into the bounce light, or how is the fill light being influenced. You also notice that when you're using this sphere that you'll pick up the elements like the actual character light rig that's being used on the character to set it up. So it's just a useful, valuable tool that's pretty simple and easy. I think it's pretty basic and most people have tips and tools like this. So try it out and we'll jump back into the basics of setting up your environment light. Let's get started. So let's go ahead and just take a quick peek around and see what the lighting looks like in our environment the way that it is at the moment. So you can see we have our volume clouds. They're kind of helping to bounce that light down. And in general, we've got some pretty nice lighting. I like the light direction and everything's looking pretty good. So let's do a quick review of what we've done so far. We added our post process in. Inside of our post process, we went down, we turned our min and max to 0, so we're not exposing up and down, and we've enabled exposure compensation at 1.8. Beyond that, we've gone to our primary directional light, and we've enabled our primary directional light and set up the direction. We've taken it down from 10 to 8 for now, just to block the light in. We've made sure to move it from stationary to movable so that it's fully ray traced. And in the details panel, we've gone and typed in Atmo to make sure that our atmosphere sunlight is attached. Next up is our Sky Atmo, which at the moment is at default. So everything here we are not touching, but we'll come back to the Art Direction tab here at a later point to go in and adjust or tweak some of the color to match the rest of the lighting or to kind of get the general tone of the environment in sync. With our skylight, we've enabled real-time capture. So if this is not enabled by default on yours, you want to go in and select, and you can see the contribution that's happening when you make that selection. We've also gone in and made sure that we're in fully movable for ray traced, and type in cast so that we can make sure that we have cast ray tracing shadows enabled. With our volumetric clouds, everything at the moment is set at default. So far, so good. It looks like we're in good shape. So if you're following along with the project, go ahead and make sure that you've taken these steps. You've gone in and you take a look at the settings, that you're kind of comfortable and familiar with where you're at, and we'll go into the next step. So once you have everything set up, go ahead and turn off and turn on the visibility of the different items that you've enabled so that you can kind of see what they're contributing and how they're contributing. As a lighter, this is going to be something that you do quite often to refresh your eye. I wanted to note that I mentioned that the volumetric clouds act sort of like a giant bounce card in the sky. So as we enable this, you can kind of take a look and look at how much this is being contributed to by the volume clouds. So it's just one of those things to note and to pay attention to, that when you add those, or maybe you forget it and you need a little bit more light, sometimes bringing that volumetric cloud system in can lift things up quite a bit for you. So I'm just taking a look at the scene in general, trying to look for those light and dark spots, anything that's reading is super flat, areas where the light's not reaching, area that needs to be filled in, anything that feels somewhat incorrect. I know that I've got this dark spot over by the entrance that I want to get filled somewhat, and I see a lot of general dark areas that are making the scene feel a little bit dingy and dirty. And while I do want to have a close to sunset type situation of around 6 or 7 o'clock, I don't want this environment to get dingy. So one of the things we're going to do to help fight that is to add in a sun spill from our directional light. Now, when you first added your lights in, you added 2 directionals, and that's what the second directional is for. So we will go in and set that up now. You'll notice on my side that I have a 3rd directional light, which we'll talk about a little bit later here, which I've titled Shade Fill. It's not something that would make it through to production. It's more of a working tool for me, or a tip or trick for you just to be able to think about light and some of the lighting design. So let's jump into the sun spill now and set that up and see how we can get some of that warm sun glow kind of seeping into the shadows without overfilling it. So when we're dealing with the sunlight in the scene, oftentimes it depends on the project, but the colors and the textures and the materials in your environment can be deceiving or throw off your color judgment or your lighting judgment. So one of the things that we're going to want to do is go up to our view mode and change this to lighting only. Let's also just go through and cycle through everything again and turn it off so that we're just left with just our sun, so that we could see what's being contributed to there. So we've dropped the second directional light in, but rather than set this light up or go in and copy and paste the rotation of the first light, since what the sun spill will be is kind of the soft glow that overspills from where the light's hitting, we're just going to actually duplicate that light. So we're going to hit G so that we can see where this light is. Select our light, and we're just going to hit Alt and drag off that light. We're going to get a warning, which is okay. You can see now that our light is kind of doubled up and become way too intense. So now that we have Sun 2, let's go ahead and make sure that we rename this. We're going to rename this to XX underscore sun spill because we already have one. And we'll delete the other once we've set this up. So now that we have sun spill set up, the first thing we're going to do is that this is just supposed to be the glow for the sun. So we're going to drop this down to like 1.5 to start with. And now we're getting that glow. We're also going to take the color and we're going to want to warm the color up from the original directional light. So by copying our sunlight, we already have our color from our original sun set. So we're just going to go ahead and roll the saturation on this up quite a bit. You might want to roll it just slightly to give it an edge and hit OK. So if I go back and forth between my sun now, I've got my kind of neutral blown out sunlight direction and I got my warm glow to it. So the other thing that you can do now is go ahead and start rotating that just slightly. Now, one of the things you'll notice is that our shadows sort of start bundling up or doubling up and doesn't look the greatest. So we're going to go over here to our source angle. Currently, the source angle is at 0.537 by default in Unreal. We're going to change that to 50 and go to the source soft angle as well and put 50 in. And that's pretty much going to mute our shadows out. So if I take this back to 0, you can see the light contribution from the shadows. All right, so now that we've got our nice soft shadows in there, then we can play around with just rotating this around a little and kind of filling in some of those areas. Now, the idea isn't to overpower the shadows. The shadows are really important and we don't want to lose those edges, but getting that extra bit of kind of spillover makes that light feel more powerful. So with our color adjusted, our intensity adjusted, our source and our soft angle adjusted, I'm also going to come in here and drop the specular scale down to 0.7. Now let's go back into our original primary sun direction and take a look at the shadows here as well. I'm going to zoom into the stairs where it's a little bit more obvious and take a look at the edge of the shadow. So as I have the sun selected, I'm going to go to the source angle. Right now it's at 0.537, which is the accuracy for the sun for Unreal's default. We're going to try this out at 1 and see how it affects the shadows. We'll try it at 3. Gets a little too soft here. So let's just go with 2 in the middle and see what that looks like. And if you go up here to the stairs, take a look around. I want to find some areas that we can notice go from hard to soft. And see what that impact is. So I really like the light being cast on the stairs, but as sharp as it is, it tends to just contribute to making it feel like CG lighting. So let's go with something like 1.3. We have our intensity set to 8, and we're all set. All right, so lighting is looking pretty good. We've got our sun spill in, we've got our main sunlight, we have our volumetric clouds, we have our skylight, we have our sky atmosphere, and the only thing we haven't messed with so far, other than the exponential height fog, is the shade fill. So we'll go over that here in a few minutes. But first I wanted to note something I mentioned before is a little bit more obvious, is that in lighting only mode, we're going to want to go down here to detail lighting and pick up our normal maps and take a look at how the lighting is affecting things at a much higher level now. So right now we're getting a lot of good lighting inside of our shadows. You can see where our sun fill is kind of contributing to getting some nice gradients and fills within there. So if I go up to my sun fill and turn it off, you can see that our shadows are pretty heavy. Sometimes you're going to want that effect. You don't want it to be dramatic. And in all honesty, the sun spill at the moment is pretty intense. But again, for the sake of demonstration, keeping it high has a lot of value. The idea is that we want to get some sunlight and some spill over here in this doorway, because I know that this is going to be an action area of the scene, and being able to get that gradient on that red door is going to make for nice backdrops against a character during certain segments. So as I turn this off and on, go around and do the same if you're following along. Set everything and look for how you're using your lighting to help define or break up flat in areas, and some of the areas that you could add interest. So in general, I'm pretty happy with the lighting in the scene so far. I'm looking at my shadows. I'm looking at the overall piece, and the piece in general is pretty warm. So what I'm looking to do is to figure out how to get a little bit of color, a little bit of saturation into the shadows. Now that's going to be done in a combination through your skylight. Your volumetric clouds can help contribute to that. Same with your sky atmosphere. One trick that I like to do to get me thinking is to add a opposing directional light to my sunlight that's colored. So if I come in with a bit of a blue as a secondary light source, then I turn this on, I can look at how that's kind of contributing. Now this does take away to some of the realism, gets you more into the zone of doing more animation style lighting, but it is helpful because oftentimes I find that even I myself forget that shadows are not necessarily the absence of light, but a overpowered light source or a dominated light source. Especially when you're dealing with sunset scenes where the sky might go from white to yellow to blue to even purples and pinks. When that sun gets really, really low and is casting lots and lots of long shadows, you still have multicolored light sources coming from the sky and filling your shadows, sometimes with nice gradients. So turning this shader or the shade fill on and off and taking a look around to see how that contributes gets me thinking about how much contribution I need, or how much I can contribute to a really warm scene and cool it down by putting this in here. And are there ways that I can get some of that in without the weight of another directional light? So for now, let's go ahead and turn that shade light on. Let's take a look around and see how everything's kind of looking here. I mentioned earlier on that oftentimes a good cinematographer can use 1 or 2 lights instead of 3 to 5 to pull something off. I think as lighters, like you want to be able to kind of flex to show you have that strength. When you get into the digital world, that doesn't always work because rather than an area have an absence of light, we literally have a vacuum, right? So even in the real world, when you have an absence of light, there's typically some low level of light still filling it. Very rarely are you ever going to see a situation in the real world where something is completely black. So anytime we see these blacks, other than the ambient occlusion that we're looking for, we want to be able to find a way to help illuminate that. The other areas are things along these rafters here. Is that I don't want to show all the detail of these rafters that's been modeled in, but getting a glint or having some sideways light kind of come down to highlight a few sells the rest. So thinking like a painter, like some of these things, we're going to want to figure out how to do with the light. I also think that it'd be great to get that specularity along the sidewall here so that we can pull out some of the details of the brick without drawing too much attention to it. So just like traditional stage work, we'll go ahead and drop in 2 big rec lights on either side here and cast some light in. And with something that's as open as this is out here, we'd be expecting a little bit more light to probably come and be bouncing around within the interior. So anytime you have a courtyard type setup like this, especially at 2 levels, lighting is going to be a tricky situation, especially if you want to keep it realistic. It's just hard to get light to move through all these areas, and you don't want to overdo it by putting too many CG lights in and illuminating everything and losing the contrast. So let's go ahead and take a look at how we might be able to add some rec lights into the front and the 2 sides to help get a little bit more light in for our choreography between our characters to help sell that they're being lit as well. So what we're doing today is establishing the basics. We're dropping in the necessary lights to get an overall lighting effect for the environment to start out with. Once we get all of our lights in and that even tone of lighting across the board, we can get much more artistic and specific and go in and start tweaking our intensities, the direction of our light, and maybe even some of like the color and stylization. So let's jump in and slow the process down and take a look at exactly what we're doing with these large rec lights and why. We'll also touch on some of the sky atmosphere, and we'll wrap up with some final thoughts. So to start out with, we're going to go into lighting only mode just to be able to take a look at what our lighting is actually affecting. So we're putting 2 large rec lights both to the left and the right and front and center of the stage. The reason for doing this is we want to get some light skimming off the top of those stairs to give a little bit of dimension to them, as well as along the side of these walls here. We're going to be picking up a lot of light, too much light over here to the right. So later on, we'd want to adjust that light or put in a light blocker to be able to tone that down. Ideally, we just want to be able to pull out some of the destruction and the surface of those bricks right here on the temple to the left. And if you notice, one of the big differences between rec lights and other lights inside of the engine is that we have barn doors and barn door length that we can adjust. Those act just like barn doors in the real world. That and the fact that the source width and the source height are adjusted in your light details rather than choosing your transform to make adjustments to them. And as you can see here, when we turn it off and on, we're getting that specularity on those side buildings, which with lighting enabled, we can see them pulling out some of the texture. Now, if we wanted to see that texture, we could go to detail lighting, which will reveal the normal map so we can see the actual bricks themselves. At the moment, it's just looking at the overall intensity on the lighting only, which is way overpowered for what it would need to be inside. But for the effect of illustrating it during this demonstration, we're going to punch that up by about 25-30% to make it read. So you can see where light spilling in helps us pull out some of the architecture underneath that overhang. And the way that we want to go about that is enough light to influence and bleed in to reveal some of that structure, but not all of it. So if you think of it like a painting, what we want to do is we want to have that detail underneath the edge be like something that goes from a hard edge to a lost edge transition. So again, just tweaking the lights and then making sure to zoom out on the overall piece. Now, if this was a piece that you're working on, I'd strongly suggest just zooming far back setting up quite a few cameras and camera bookmarks both alike, going in and changing your lenses so that you can get a read of how everything is pulling together. Just like with concept art or sculpting, if you're lighting when you're zoomed in, you're not going to end up with an overall strong feel when you zoom out, because you're going to be paying attention to those little details that individually read, but as a whole, you might be losing it. So let's go ahead and flip off and on our rec lights that are contributing to the side. As you can see right now, they're way blown out. However, on this left building here, we're getting that nice speck on the brick that we were talking about earlier. So these are the type of effects we're looking for. And right now it works just to build them in and make sure to revisit them. And depending on your production and how close you are to handoff or not, you'll have to keep track of that and understand if you have the time to be able to come back. If you don't, you're going to need to stick with it and finish it out. But it's oftentimes a good idea to build in your base of everything, work it through, and then come back later as a final pass to make those tweaks to things like light intensity, color, direction, and rotation tweaks that you want to kind of finalize and spend a little bit more time on. So let's open up the sky atmosphere. We're going to go into the art direction panel. This is going to be somewhere that you want to play around with. In oil painting, a lot of times you can start out with the terrain and finish with the sky. If you start with the sky, oftentimes what can happen is your sky ends up far too blue and looks a little bit too comical for the scene. So we want to take that idea into the digital world, into the engine. We can start with an initial sky that looks good, but we can use the art direction tab over here in the details panel to go in and tweak that color to be a little bit warmer or cooler and match the environment that we're in. We can also play with things like aerial perspective view distance scale or transmission min light, aerial perspective start depth. That will allow us to make the clouds heavier, more dense, have a little bit more storm-like quality and darkness below them, or create a haze like you can often see out here in Los Angeles that covers the city with fog. Hopefully all of this is giving you the confidence to jump into the project if you're new to lighting and try out your own lighting design and own aesthetics. Thinking about how you would light this piece is a good challenge. And this is also a really strong piece if showing a lighting supervisor to demonstrate strength in your ideation or lighting design with something that's hard to tackle inside of a particular set of architecture. There's a lot of opportunity to show strength in cinematography and how you choose to deal with it. So for any of you out there that give it a try, please feel free to post and touch up with us over at Molten 3D or on our Facebook pages. And we'd love to see what you come up with. I hope you enjoyed yourself, and thanks for listening.